People believe wealth gives freedom, but in powerful families, wealth becomes control. This is not a fairy tale. This is a story of entitlement, manipulation, emotional neglect, and a man who learned too late that love cannot be forced, bought, or replaced. Adrian Blackwood didn't just inherit billions. He inherited a mindset. He grew up in a mansion where silence spoke louder than affection. Feelings were never discussed. Weakness was never tolerated. His parents died young, leaving him under the guardianship of his grandfather, Henry Blackwood, a self-made billionaire who believed discipline built men, not tenderness. Adrian became sharp, controlled, and emotionally unavailable. Years ago, he had loved someone deeply. When that relationship ended, it didn't just break his heart, it confirmed his belief. Attachment only leads to loss. From that moment on, Adrian buried himself in work. Deals replaced emotions, power replaced connection. Marriage, to him, was unnecessary, even dangerous. But while Adrian was building an empire, Henry was watching time slip through his fingers. Henry Blackwood was old now. Doctors spoke in careful tones. Medications lined his bedside table. What scared him wasn't death, it was legacy. He had built everything from nothing, and now there was no family beyond Adrian, no grandchildren, no continuation. One evening, over a quiet dinner, Henry finally said it. "I want to see my great-grandchildren before I die." Adrian didn't even look up. "I'm not getting married." Henry paused, then delivered the ultimatum. "If you don't marry, I will donate every penny of this empire. You'll inherit nothing." Adrian smirked, assuming it was an empty threat. But Henry wasn't bluffing. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about control and fear. For the first time in his life, Adrian realized something unsettling. The power he thought he owned could be taken away. And that's when everything began to spiral. The Blackwood headquarters sat at the heart of the city. Glass, steel, and silence. Board meetings ran like clockwork. Executives spoke carefully. No one wasted words in Adrian Blackwood's presence. That's when Henry noticed her, Elena Carter. She sat slightly apart from the table, quietly taking notes, organizing files, anticipating needs before they were voiced. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, and that's what stood out. Middle-class background, self-made education, no designer labels, no forced confidence, just calm dignity. Henry watched how she spoke, respectfully but not timidly, how she listened, fully without interrupting, how she handled pressure, gracefully. Something about her felt grounded. After the meeting, Henry asked casually, "Who is she?" Adrian answered without interest, "My secretary." That was all. But to Henry, she was more than that. She was everything his grandson wasn't. Emotionally present, stable, unspoiled by power. That night, Henry made a decision that would change all their lives. When Adrian found out what his grandfather was planning, his reaction was immediate and ugly. Absolutely not. He confronted Elena the very next morning. His tone was sharp, professional, but deliberately cold. "You should stay in your lane," he said. "Don't mistake proximity to power as an invitation." From that day on, the atmosphere shifted. Adrian criticized her work in public, dismissed her ideas, spoke to her like she was disposable, not because she was incompetent, but because she represented something he hated, control he was losing. Yet, despite everything, he couldn't fire her. Henry liked her. So did his grandmother. Elena endured it silently because she needed the job, because hospital bills were stacking up, because somewhere across the city her younger brother was fighting cancer, and she was the only one paying for his treatment. She told herself it was temporary, that professionalism meant survival. She didn't know yet that survival would soon come at a devastating price. Henry Blackwood had mastered every ruthless business deal in his life. But this decision gnawed at his conscience. One quiet evening, he asked Elena to meet him in the garden. a place where walls didn't block truth. "Elena," he said gently, "I know about your brother." Her chest tightened. She hadn't told anyone, not Adrian, not colleagues. Hospital visits were quiet, secret, private. Henry's voice lowered. "His treatment is expensive, experimental. Time is running out." Elena's eyes widened. She already knew what he meant. "If you marry my grandson, he will provide everything needed for your brother's treatment. If you don't, I can't help anymore." The weight of the ultimatum hit her like a punch. This wasn't love. This wasn't marriage. This was a transaction of survival. She tried to protest, reminded him of Adrian's cruelty, his emotional neglect. Henry's voice softened. "I believe once Adrian becomes a father, he will change." Elena swallowed hard, and silently, painfully, she said yes. What if Adrian never changes? What if this promise only traps her deeper? The wedding was spectacular. Luxury venues, flashing cameras, a guest list of people who worshipped status over sincerity. Elena stood in her gown, perfect, composed, painfully beautiful. Adrian stood next to her, cold, distant, emotionally checked out. That night, behind closed doors, reality hit hard. "This marriage means nothing to me," Adrian said flatly. "Don't expect anything more than obligation." Elena lay awake under a chandelier that sparkled like a million promises, none of which were hers. Down the hall, Henry sat alone, staring at a family portrait, already feeling like a lie. "Time will fix this," he whispered to himself. Months would pass, but some mistakes don't reveal themselves immediately. They unfold, slowly. Months passed, but Adrian's heart remained untouched. Elena worked tirelessly, keeping the household running, managing his schedule, and silently bearing the weight of her own disappointment. Even as she smiled in front of guests, inside she felt invisible. Adrian came home late, sometimes not at all. When he was present, his words were sharp, his tone dismissive. Henry's reassurance echoed in her mind. Once you have a baby, he will change. But each day that passed, hope became heavier than despair. Scene detail. Elena sits alone at the dinner table. The chandelier sparkles above, but she feels cold. The children's laughter is imaginary. There are no children yet. Outside, the city lights twinkle, a world thriving, while her life feels frozen. Then, just when Elena thought she had reached the breaking point, Adrian's ex returned, and the memories he had buried for years came rushing back with a force that made everything around him feel meaningless. Adrian, who had been cold and distant, suddenly shifted all his attention, abandoning Elena emotionally in ways that cut deeper than any words could, leaving her feeling invisible in her own home, despite carrying his child. He started spending more time away, with every excuse and every delay pulling her further into isolation and fear, while the promises of change Henry had made began to feel hollow, and Elena realized that no amount of patience could protect her from a husband whose heart was still captive to a past that refused to release him. The silence between them grew heavier, and with every passing day, the weight of betrayal pressed down harder, forcing her to confront a terrifying truth, that love alone might never be enough to save her marriage or secure the life she was desperately trying to protect. Months passed, and tension at home only grew heavier. Elena's anxiety had been simmering, and one afternoon she could no longer hide the truth. She was pregnant. She waited until Adrian returned from a long, late meeting and told him quietly, almost fearing his reaction. But instead of relief or care, Adrian's face twisted with disbelief and anger. "What are you talking about? That's impossible," he spat, his voice cold, sharp, almost cruel. Elena tried to explain, tears welling up. "Adrian, this is real. I'm carrying your child." He laughed bitterly, shaking his head as if it were a joke. "I don't want this. I never wanted this. You married me for money, didn't you? You're greedy, manipulating me to trap me into responsibility," he said, each word cutting deeper than she could have imagined. Elena stood there, heartbroken, realizing that the man she had married was still bound to his past, blind to the life they could have built together. Henry, when told of this, was heartbroken too. His eyes, once filled with hope, now reflected a deep, sorrowful fear. He had wanted grandchildren, and yet the walls of cruelty and neglect were growing higher around them. The next day, the household felt colder than ever. Adrian packed his things and made it clear he would leave. "I'll divorce you. I can't do this," he said, as if ending their marriage could erase the responsibility he refused to accept. Elena's world shattered, but she stood strong, holding her unborn child close in her mind, even if Adrian couldn't see it yet. She left the house quietly, taking nothing with her, no money, no possessions, only her dignity and the life growing inside her. Adrian watched her go, feeling a brief twinge of guilt, but it faded quickly as he convinced himself that this was the right choice. Yet as he settled into life with his ex again, distractions, luxuries, and fleeting moments of attention replaced the warmth and care he had ignored for so long. But reality didn't wait. Business started failing, losses accumulated, and slowly the weight of everything he had neglected began crushing him. And somewhere deep down, Adrian realized, leaving Elena, abandoning his child, and ignoring what truly mattered was a cost far higher than any money could ever repay. Years had passed, and Adrian finally began to feel the weight of all the choices he had made. He had chased the past, ignoring the present, and now he had nothing. His wealth felt hollow, deals were failing, and his ex had long left him for someone richer and more stable. Then, one day, he saw Elena again. Not just Elena, but their children, two small faces he had once ignored, now unmistakably his. Guilt hit him like a tidal wave. Every cruel word, every night he had ignored her pain, every moment he had chosen his past over his family came flooding back. He wanted her back, desperately, to bring her into his life again, but she wouldn't even meet his gaze. Elena's heart had risen above the pain he caused. She had survived, raised their children on her own, taken care of every need without asking for anything, not even money. Adrian approached cautiously, his voice shaking. "Elena, I know I've destroyed everything. I want to fix this. I want you back in my life." She looked at him, calm but distant, her voice steady. "Adrian, the life you left me to survive, it wasn't easy. I raised them alone. I didn't ask for your money. I didn't ask for your presence. I survived without you. That's my life now." Her refusal wasn't anger, it was quiet strength, the kind of strength he had never valued before. But Adrian was relentless. He couldn't leave without her. He wanted to prove that he could be the man they needed, the father and husband he had refused to be for so long. Elena stood her ground, but life had its own way of nudging her. The children, innocent and unaware of the tension between their parents, began to suffer in subtle ways. Their laughter sometimes quieted, their spirits dimmed when Adrian wasn't there, when he was just a shadow in their world. Slowly, she realized that, for the children's sake, they needed him. But she would not return for herself. She had lived independently, survived on her own, and built a life of dignity. Adrian, understanding her boundaries, didn't push beyond reason, but he took responsibility, showing up for the children consistently, proving that he could be a father first, a husband second. Gradually, as days turned into weeks, Elena began to allow small moments, letting him guide the children on outings, letting him share in their daily lives. She remained firm in her independence, but a fragile connection began to form, built on the trust that he would not betray them again. And slowly, over months, Adrian's actions spoke louder than words. His patience, his presence, his willingness to support her and the children without demanding her return eventually softened her heart. She returned, not suddenly, not fully, but step by step, understanding that while love could not erase the past, commitment, responsibility, and care could build a future worth trying for. It was slow, it was deliberate, but eventually a family, broken once, tested by betrayal and survival, began to heal together. Years of mistakes, regret, and struggle had finally brought Adrian and Elena to a fragile understanding. The children, once caught between absence and longing, now had both parents present in their lives. Adrian had learned, through loss and near devastation, that wealth and power could never replace love, presence, or responsibility. He continued to prove himself daily, not through grand gestures, but through patience, consistency, and the quiet acts of care that had once seemed meaningless to him. Elena, who had survived alone with courage and dignity, gradually allowed herself to believe that change was real, that trust could be rebuilt, and that her children could finally grow up in a family that was whole again. It wasn't instant, it wasn't easy, but day by day, step by step, walls came down, hearts softened, and the family began to heal. Laughter returned to the home, small routines became treasured moments, and a life once fractured by greed, obsession, and neglect was now guided by forgiveness, accountability, and love. Adrian finally understood. The greatest legacy he could leave wasn't wealth, titles, or power. It was family, presence, and the courage to fight for what truly mattered. And as the sun set over the Blackwood estate, they stood together, a family tested, scarred, but unbroken, ready to face the future as one. If you enjoyed this story and want more real-life inspired drama, hit like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Which part shocked you the most?